There.
Go ahead, Martha.
Okay, so we can call the meeting to order. And Cindy, why don't you authorize Deb and Russ? You can authorize them to vote
So done.
so that we have a voting quorum. So. Okay. Okay, so the first thing on the agenda is the minutes, the January minutes. Is there any comment or discussion on the minutes?
I have one question and one suggestion,
Mhm.
and it has to do with the discussion of the nature of signs that I presented.
Mhm.
The minutes say that we had, let me see if I can find the exact language. It says that I reported that the town attorney provided information. It actually was not the town attorney, it was another attorney who was in the town attorney's law firm. So I don't know if you think, that's my question. Is that close enough, or could I, perhaps we should say that attorney Michael Carey from the town attorney's law firm.
Okay, why don't we do that?
Yeah.
So it's Michael, and the last name is Carey.
Okay, I'll make that adjustment there.
And then I would request that we just add at the end of that discussion that I have asked some follow-up questions and will report at the next meeting.
Okay.
I think the language that's in there is okay, but and accurate, but there are a couple clarifications, and I just don't want people to read it and say, oh, here's the last word of
Okay,
where things stand.
yep, that's fine. So, are there any other comments on the minutes?
No.
Do I have a motion to approve them as amended?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, the next thing on the agenda is communications. We received an email from Michaela Pearson. The Old Lyme Historical Society is applying to get a marker honoring Catherine Luddington, who was the founder of the National League of Women Voters and president of the Connecticut Women's Suffragette Association. And it would be a sign similar to the Lafayette Trail marker. And it would be near 2 Lime Street, which is known as the Luddington House. That was her home. And the homeowners, Holly and Barry Cox, have given their approval for that. So it needs to be approved by the Historic District Commission, and we'll actually consider this at our March meeting, and we'll have a public hearing then.
Martha, it sounds as if it sounds as if it's going to be very close to the Lafayette sign, right?
Yeah, yep, yep. The Historic District Commission has control over the exact location. So we can consult with people and figure out what's the best way to do that. But we'll talk about that at the March meeting.
Okay.
And next is the public open forum. Is there anyone here from the public who would like to say anything?
I'm sorry, Martha, before we leave that other one, have they yet submitted anything about the design or size, or is it gonna look just like the Lafayette sign?
It'll be similar in size. I'm not sure about the design. I don't think it'll be red, white, and blue like the Lafayette sign. But those details, we'll find out about those.
I think there's some question as to whether having two just so close together
Mhm.
is something that we necessarily, but anyway, we'll consider it. Maybe we'll do a site visit.
Yeah, we can get more information on it. I have some basic information. And so we'll definitely have more information by the time we have our public hearing in March.
And Martha, do you have the wording yet? You don't have the wording, I imagine.
For this, it would be something like votes for women, home of suffrage leader Catherine Ludington, president, Connecticut Women's Suffrage Association, and a founder of the League of Women Voters. It would be, it's kind of by the same people who are doing the Lafayette Trail Marker. It's the William Pomeroy Foundation that is supporting it.
Oh, really?
So I think it's very similar.
Same group.
Yeah, yeah.
Would that include her dates of birth and death?
Yes, 1869 to 1953.
If it's possible, could you, Martha, please just circulate the language
Sure. Yep.
so we can think about that before the meeting?
Yep, absolutely. I'll have more information on what the sign would look like and the size also. So
I think it's a point just to bring up. I mean, I support both of these signs.
mhm.
I do, but I mean, we could just have signs everywhere up and down this street.
I know.
There are a lot of different people who had important roles
Right.
in history. So I think we might not want to have every, anyway, it's just something to think
Yeah.
about as we move forward with these.
Yeah. Okay, I see we have a third call-in user, and who would that be?
This is Martha Ames.
Okay, thank you. Good. And
May I just formally say who I am?
yes, of course.
Well, thank you. For those of you that don't know me, I'm MJ DeRizio, and I am a realtor here in town with William Pitt Sotheby's. And one of the core areas of my business is historic homes throughout the region. Hence my participation in this meeting. I'd like to just listen to what's going on
Okay,
for now.
and it looks like we have Kate Hewitt here also.
Hi, yes, I'm here, Kate.
Yep.
Nice to
Hi,
see you
Kate.
guys. Thank you.
Okay, so on to the secretary's report. 38 Lime Street, the open C of A's that we have. 38 Lime Street, I see that they've been doing some foundation work on that house. So that is continuing. 97 Lime Street shed has not been started yet. And the Ferry Road sidewalk project will be started in the spring sometime, and there will be a site walk scheduled for sometime this week. And the exact day is going to be determined depending on the weather. And that will be with the tree commission to take a look at the trees and see which ones might need to be removed. There have been some recommendations by a landscape architect to remove some of the trees there, but nothing's been decided yet. And our annual certified local government report will be submitted this week. This report lists the activities of the Historic District Commission for the last fiscal year, and we file that with the Connecticut Commission on Culture and Tourism. So it's just an overview of what has been happening in the historic district. And then I did send out the updated like-for-like form. Were there any comments on that?
Yes, Martha, thank you for sending it. Let me just call it up.
I made a lot of changes in it. I made it so that it was more logically able to be compared with the C of A form.
Yes. No, I think it's much better.
Better than it was.
Much better. And thank you for making those changes. My only real question has to do with the discussion that's noted in the minutes that we had last meeting
The
about
signage.
temporary and permanent signs. As we reported then, the attorney thought that there was no distinction between our authority over temporary and permanent signs.
Mhm.
And as you noted in the minutes, a distinction that's made in the town regulation does not supersede our authority under state statute. I
Mhm.
think in reality, by the time, if a sign were temporary, if somebody thought to submit an application, by the time we had a hearing and considered it, the sign would probably be gone. And I do have a little more to say when I get to report on the follow-up questions.
Mhm.
But for this form, I wonder if both on page 1 and on page 2, where you say signage permanent, we
Yeah.
should just say signage.
Just signage, just not say that.
Just not include the parens.
Yeah, just have it as signage, just plain signage. That sounds good.
I would recommend that. And then there's also under the heading description of replacement work, you have the same issue on page 2 in the front.
Right, yeah.
So,
yeah.
And then under details of like-for-like work on page 2, you also have the same issue.
Right, yeah, I see that. Okay, I'll just delete those and we'll just say signage and leave it at that. Okay, great.
Do we need to approve this now to say this is the form we're going to use?
We could certainly do that, sure. Does someone want to make a motion?
Sure, I will. To approve with those alterations.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, and it's now 9:20, and we can start our public hearing for the Witness Stones project. Carolyn, do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, certainly. The Witness Stones project has been continuing to develop since the discussions first began in the fall. This, as you know from the description, is a project that was started by Dennis Culleton, a retired junior high school teacher in the Guilford public school system. And the project has been expanded to include towns like Madison, Farmington, West Hartford, and a number of others, Simsbury, Salisbury, Greenwich. I think Dennis now has a project beginning in New Jersey and one in Pennsylvania. The project is modeled on the stones that are placed, 70,000 of them, I think, in European cities to mark the spots where victims of the Nazi persecutions, the Holocaust, were last lived before they were taken captive, apprehended, and so on. So Dennis began the project with the permission or the accord of the project that was taking place in Germany and other European countries. Now it's spreading across Connecticut, and it seems to be gathering strength as communities attempt to recover chapters of their history which have been lost over time, and to recognize the humanity and the contributions of those who were formerly enslaved in communities in Connecticut and elsewhere in New England, and as I said, Pennsylvania now as well. So the proposal is to place 12 witness stones on properties on Lime Street, which are sites of former enslavement. The plaques are made of bronze. They're 4 by 4 inches. They're very small. They're attached to concrete cubes, which are 4 by 4 by 4 inches. They would be surrounded by a frame or collar of concrete to protect the edges of the brass and to provide a barrier from grass. Most of these stones, and perhaps all of them, will be placed in grass rather than in paving. I think you've probably had a chance to see Martha circulated a photograph of 2 stones placed side by side in front of the Guilford Savings Bank on the Guilford Green amidst some paving stones. And then I think her other photograph was of 2 plaques, not quite so closely connected because they're placed in a concrete material that provides a border, and those I believe are in the West Hartford Cemetery. So you've had a chance, if you've looked at those, to see what the stones would look like. They can be mowed over. They would be restored or polished twice a year by volunteers from the First Congregational Church, probably the youth group and the Sunday school. And they would be placed on properties with the permission of the property owners. And they would stretch from the Congregational Church up to the Upper Green on the top of Sill Lane. Is there anything else I can tell you about those right now, or do you have any questions? Otherwise, I'll move on to the library sign, which is the second part of the request.
I'd like to say something. This is Martha Ames.
Yes.
Wouldn't it be more beneficial to make a brochure and have a walking tour up Lime Street and explain, just pointing out the houses rather than have plaques?
Well, thank you for your question. What we hope to do is both. The plaques would actually be something permanent that people could view and remember and perhaps ask questions about. And in addition, there would be a map, which would be perhaps a grab and go card. At least that's a suggestion from the Old Lyme librarian, which would be available at different sites along Lime Street and throughout the town, perhaps, other places, not only on Lime Street, which would familiarize people with the outlines of the program and it's the project and its goals, and would provide a map with an indication of which historic houses or which historic properties. Some of the properties no longer have houses on them. The houses have been demolished. Which historic properties were in the past sites of enslavement. So my short answer is we would like to do both. Yes, the brochure, I think it's a wonderful idea, and also something more permanent, more lasting, which would be the plaques in the ground.
I see.
Carolyn, will the homeowners, how will they be notified?
They'll be asked. They will be asked if we have their permission, their consent to place stones in front of their houses.
Okay. My husband and I are former owners.
By phone or by email, yes.
Because my husband and I are former owners of 47 Lime Street, so we did the renovation there. But I just feel like if I still own that house, I would respectfully decline, because I think it is branding of the house. That's just my personal opinion as a former Lime Street homeowner.
Would you mind telling me which house is 47 Lime Street?
It's the one to the right of Center School.
Oh, right. Yep.
So we bought it probably in 2000 or so.
South of Center School or north?
South.
But that's not a site of enslavement, so you wouldn't have to worry.
Right, but even still, like, I'm just wondering the sampling of homeowners, if they are interested in this.
It's a very good question, and if a homeowner objects, we would certainly honor that objection and not pursue the effort to place a stone there. There are other options, because property owners in the period have large stretches of property. There are other options, and there are other houses. My last count was that there are perhaps 45 enslaved persons held in enslavement on Lime Street over the decades. So we have lots of options.
I would just like to say that in my opinion, this is an extraordinarily important move, and kind of goes to Marty's question. I like the idea of both the pamphlet and the stones. People may come across the stones without the pamphlet, and it really is a cause for recognition of, as Carolyn says, a forgotten part of our history, but also an occasion perhaps for reflection. Yeah, I agree with these are not going to be imposed on anyone who does not want a stone in front of their house, but I do think it's a significant contribution to the town.
I wondered if, I'm not necessarily opposed to it, but if there was opposition, whether another way to honor this history would be on the library lawn to have a larger structure, stone, with all of these names, all of the brass plaques with the names of all of the people that were, engaged on Lime Street, without, as Deb says, branding the houses. It would be another way to mark it.
I agree.
That was you, Marty?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, okay.
Could I ask a question? I'm interested in your use of the word brand. Why that particular word? It
Are you
seems,
speaking to me?
yes, I am, Marty. I mean, does it seem
I'm sorry,
to?
I didn't hear the question.
I'm curious about why the placement of a small stone in the ground seems to brand, why the word branding is what you would choose to describe it. I'm just interested in that.
No, I didn't say branding it. I said I agree with putting a plaque down at the library with all the people's names on it. I don't think they have to be in front of individual houses.
Okay.
Am I allowed to speak?
Yes.
Am I allowed to speak?
Yep, absolutely.
I don't want to split hairs over the semantics, but my feedback, my professional feedback, and I'm also on EDC, I forgot to mention that, Economic Development Commission, is that it could be interpreted as having a negative connotation. And to the extent that there's a property value involved or a buyer involved who may or may not like it or be turned on or off by it is a factor that you should also take into consideration. I'm not suggesting what you should or shouldn't do, but it's a very, there are pros and cons, and it's very seriously discussed. People have commented about why not also do additional research in terms of the Underground Railroad. There's a house on the corner of Ferry across from the church that actually has history of the Underground Railroad, and I'm sure there are others. So it's just an offsetting thing. You know, the viewpoint seems to be to not so much enlighten. Some people may feel guilty. Why do you want them to do that when perhaps they just happen to purchase a home unbeknownst to them, that there had been a history there and they don't all see it as a positive recognition. Just feedback, that's all.
No, I think it's
But
excellent.
thanks for hearing me out.
Yes, of course. That's excellent feedback. And I don't think this is something that should be or needs to be viewed as either positive or negative. It's just something that happened. And it's part of the history of the town, and it's a part that hasn't been recognized. And it's an important part of the history of the town. So this would be one way of paying attention to something that's been ignored. About the Underground Railroad houses, I think that's very important history. I'm working on it. I think the house on the corner is perhaps less likely to have been a stop, as it were, on the Underground Railroad than the house that Cindy Taylor now lives in. And I'm not sure I'm right, but perhaps there's already a plaque on your house, Cindy, or some kind of a marker that acknowledges the Underground Railroad. So those places, although they haven't been and perhaps never will be proved, are being acknowledged with plaques. So I know Sandy Brainerd, who lived in the house on the corner that you're talking about. I did discuss that with him a few years ago before he passed away. And he was, he actually, to be honest with you, laughed and said that he thought there was no chance at all that that was true for his particular house. That's just the view of a property owner. But more research needs to be done, and I'm in the process of working on that. It takes a lot of effort to try to figure out who might have been the former owners of those houses and what their abolition or non-abolition sentiments are. And so that's a context that needs to be established.
And I will tell you that we are ethically bound not to express that kind of commentary when we're selling real estate. So I can't control what a buyer or seller is thinking.
Yes, of course.
So.
And what about things like George Washington slept here or danced here? Those things can be acknowledged by real estate.
They can be if you're selling a house, yes, because it would potentially attract more buyers. If you're buying a house, some people just buy for the architecture or because they want to be an old lime. No one really, it's not the priority. I will tell you that, ever. But people do think about it. And I represent Marty, actually, and I had a client who didn't want to look at her house when all the bunting was up on the church. She said, this is too controversial. It's not for me.
Right.
That's not helpful. So just as a point in fact.
Thank you.
Okay.
So I actually have a question about the stones. Let's say that that a stone was installed in front of a property and then it changed hands and the property owner said, you know, I don't really like this here. Would that stone be able to be moved or relocated in that case? Who actually owns the stones?
Well, I believe that, well, we haven't established that, Martha. I'm not actually sure. That's a very good question.
Okay.
I'll have to look into that, or maybe you can advise me. But I should think, I see no reason why a stone could not be removed or relocated, placed in a different location if a future property owner were to object.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly for me, there would be no reason not to relocate it. They're very small. Wouldn't be hard to dig up and to replace,
Right.
to reposition, to relocate. So, but that's my personal opinion.
Are there any other comments?
Carolyn, you're going to speak about the sign in front of the library, yes?
Yes, I was just waiting to see if there were questions about the stones.
Yep.
But let me move on to the library, and then you can still ask other questions if you have them. On somewhere on the lower front lawn of the library, the exact location will be decided after the library approves the redesign of its gardens and of its own signage. But on the lower, they have approved placing a sign, an interpretive sign, on their lawn, which would include, you've perhaps had a chance to look at the image. The image is a mock-up of the sign. It's not exact in any way in its details. The locators are not in the appropriate places and so on. The details are not exact, but the layout is approximate. The wording is approximate. The colors are approximate. And the size of the interpretive sign would be not larger than 36 by 24 and not smaller than 24 by 18. So that gives you a size range to consider what the sign would look like. It would like to be on a single post. The post would be decided by the library to coordinate with the other signage that it's now replacing. And the sign would point out the locations on Lime Street that are being indicated with the witness stones.
This is Russ. I have one question. The Historic District Commission's responsibility is to is it to review and recommend the placement of the stone, or is it simply an approval of the stone? And in other words, the discussion about relocating the stone, are we being asked to approve, or are we making a recommendation? I guess just clarity on what our role would be here.
Martha, were you able to reach Mary Dunn to get any information from her about the responsibility?
No, I haven't been able to reach her.
Some of the
Hello, I'm sorry I'm late.
Oh, hi, John.
I had my physical therapy took longer today.
On that question, Russ, that's an issue that I'll touch on when we get to the follow-up questions about signage. But the short answer for now is I think this is a hearing on a C of A, yes?
That's correct.
So we do have authority with respect to location, a convoluted story, but we do, and as well as size and design and all of that. We have no authority over the or IPSK.
Sure.
We don't control that.
Understood. Perfect. Yeah.
I did have a question relating to location, though, and sorry I didn't think of this before. Martha, were you checking on the state's right-of-way over the highway and how far back from the pavement it extended?
Yes, yes.
And what did you find out there?
Well, what I found out was that there is no set foot marker for the right of way. It depends on, it changes depending on the road and the house. So there is no particular standard. And Lime Street north of I-95 is actually US 1. So it's a state road. So anything that is installed along that road we would need to consult the state DOT. And our zoning enforcement officer, Dan Beret, is looking into that. As far as any stones on Lime Street, that would go through would have to be approved by the Board of Selectmen also. So there are other entities who would be involved in any type of approval for this.
Martha, I have a specific question. If a marker were placed on Lime Street inside of the sidewalk, where does the town? How much property? Where is the boundary line for the town land and the owner's land? I don't know how that works.
We would need to find that out on a case-by-case basis.
Okay.
We would need to look at the actual maps, and we would work with Public Works on that, and also our zoning people. They do that quite often. I know that the Tree Commission quite often has to consult the town maps for right-of-way to figure out which trees are actually town trees, and which are entirely the responsibility of the homeowner. So that's a pretty standard thing to do, and it varies up and down the street.
Do you
So
know?
it would be on a case-by-case basis.
Do you know, Martha, with respect to homes north of the highway that along the state road, whether the maps, the assessor's maps, are just approximate when they show a straight line boundary that comes close to the road but doesn't exactly? Are they just approximate maps, or are they precise maps?
What we see, like if you were to look it up on the GIS system online, what you would see would be approximate.
Okay.
There are more detailed maps at the town hall that would be consulted.
Okay.
Yeah, on that point, John, the individual property owner would have a property line description. I know when we were installing our fence, we had to verify that property line position between our property and the state right of way, and that was all in the deed description.
It's a little awkward in some cases, I suspect, with respect to our property. The deed description is carried over from a description that is very old and quite imprecise.
One other thing that now we live, as you know, with south of I-95, and the boundary of the original setback boundaries when Lime Street was US 1, before it was moved along Halls Road still remain intact. So that's another complication, not a complication, but another thing if you haven't covered that, that we'll need to take into account. When we remodeled our house, the setback, before you start counting the further setback from the boundary, was back about 5 feet in front of our house, which meant our whole living room would have had to be removed if they applied that. So that's another consideration that and this was all done by zoning. And I don't think there's been any change in the requirements established. I mean, the implied requirements that were established when Lime Street was Route 1. It may be that we'd want to sit down with the zoning people if that's not already happened.
I have a question for Carolyn. Carolyn, have letters or requests gone out to various property owners yet?
Phone calls have gone out to property owners. There are only three property owners whom we've consulted, because others are organizations. So we've received permission from for all the placement of all signs, except for one sign that we're still one stone. We're still considering which side of the street the property owner lived on in 1741, and where exactly to place that stone. And that requires careful scrutiny of the land records, which three of us have already done. I'm going to ask Martha to take a look at that as well. But with the exception of the stone, because we're not certain about where it should be located, all other property owners have been consulted and have given their approval, or in the case of some property owner not giving approval, we will certainly place a stone in a different location.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Deanie.
Is there any other discussion?
How many people have said they would have the stone in front of their house?
There are 9 locations. 10 locations in all, and 9 of the sites have been agreed to. So this, except with the exception of this one that I haven't pursued yet, but I will do in as short order as I can. So
well, now that you've got their approval, you still have to go through checking out the zoning and things like that, don't you?
That sounds right, from what I understand from Martha, John.
Okay.
Also have to get the selectmen's approval.
Yes, that's right.
If I could suggest on the zoning, I think it would be useful to brief the head of the zoning commission before you actually have the zoning meeting. That's just been the process that we've used as we've made each of our changes to our house.
Thank you, Joan.
So what we need to do is to decide if we should move ahead with the stones and also move ahead with the sign. And if there's no more specific discussion, we could have a motion to move ahead with the Witness Stones project based on approvals from the homeowners and the Board of Selectmen
And zoning? Or
and zoning. Yeah, with consultation with zoning.
so you don't think it's an actual agenda item for zoning meeting so much as just a consultation?
Well, the consultation with zoning would just be as far as the location.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
So that's kind of it's a detail. It's an important detail, but it I don't think it's a make or break thing. It's more like, we need to know who has jurisdiction over each location and how to go through the approval process for that.
Martha, I would say until you have the meeting with the zoning commission, the head of the zoning board, I would say that we don't know whether it's approval or whether it's just consultation.
Mm-hmm.
Because this particular line, I mean, I'll just give an example. On the zoning board of approval, when we made our application, there was one individual that was quite adamant that some person from out of town who wanted to build a mansion on Lime Street was flouting the setback rules. And it turned out that June Spears, who was one of the grand dames of Old Lyme, who ran the commission, said, "That's a great comment, but not for Old Lyme." So my only point is that I don't know enough about the zoning people today to understand the secondary politics, but they can exist.
You bet.
I tried to say that as gently as I could.
Well, I will move proceeding with the Witness Stones project as with the caveats of the need for at least discussion or approval of the zoning commission and the Board of Selectmen.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, that's any nays or abstentions? Okay, motion passes. And I'd also like a motion to approve give preliminary approval to the library sign so that they can move ahead with that. And what we know about that is we know the approximate size and the approximate design. And the approximate location, and the details of that would still need to be settled on, but we know we have an approximate idea of what that's going to be. Carolyn, do you know what the timeline would be for finalizing that?
No, and I did ask that, Martha, because it's an important question, and I've been in touch both with the chair of the board and also the librarian. She's not able to be on the call with us now, but I think they're in the process. Whether it's the final process, I think it is the final process of doing the redesign of their front garden and their signage. And they have, I know they've, I understand, my understanding is contact or are now in contact with the company that would produce the sign to have them incorporate the layout and copy and design and coloring of the Witness Stone's interpretive sign into the overall signage package for the library itself. So whether it's a matter of weeks, I hope it's a matter of weeks. Whether it's a matter of months, I don't think it's going to be too many months, but I don't have a final date, and I did ask for one.
Carolyn, is there any impact between this decision and what they're doing relative to moving the sculpture?
The sculpture wasn't mentioned, John. I wondered about that. I know from our HDC discussions previously that the sculpture is part of their, my understanding is that it's part of their design plans, but it wasn't mentioned specifically in relationship to the Witness Stone sign.
What is the size of the sign?
It would be either between 2 and 3 feet wide and between 1.5 and 2 feet high. So probably somewhere in the 2 feet by 24 inches by 18 range.
And with these details unsettled, would this commission have a chance to review, placement, exact size, exact lettering, font, and all before they're actually installed?
The font and the lettering have been approved by the Witness Stones Committee and by the library. So that is, to my understanding, not in question. So those you can see in the mock-up. The things that have not been decided are whether it will be 3 feet or 2 feet. And I actually have a hard copy in my office to take to the site. It's a question of how big, what does it look like on the site? It may look fairly big in my office, but what does it look like when it's there? So the garden committee will be discussing that and reviewing that. But it would be between those parameters that I provided you. So those things are set. The things not set are the exact location on the lower lawn, the lower front lawn, and the material for the base of the sign. At least that's my understanding.
Given their timeline, is there any problem for us if we said we want to see the final version and everything before saying yes or no?
I'm not sure if that. Do you want me to answer that, John?
Well, yes. If you can give us that information, I just was asking.
Right.
Because many times, let me say, many of our signs, thinking about the one for the one for the Historical Society and the one for the Lymeview Services Bureau as just examples. In both those cases, we had, a definitive, everything was what their recommendation was a complete recommendation, not a partial.
Right, I understand. And just for context, the size, the 36 by 24 size is the size, I believe, of the Lafayette Trail sign, which was approved, at an earlier meeting.
Yeah.
So just in case that helps you to imagine it. I would think it would be, one option would be what I think Martha said is for approval for the library to proceed with the sign, and then with the caveat that the HDC would review the materials and the location when those have been approved by the library board or the whatever their process is. I think it will be approved by the board.
Well, what happens if, I'm just saying this is a so what. I'm not arguing one way or the other. So please understand, Mike. What happens if they decide to come back with a sign that is totally out of character, even though it fits within the 2x3 and stuff like that? And I can't envision that. It sounds like the cat's already out of the bag.
Yes, I think it will be consistent with the other signage. It's not going to be there's not going to be a wild card here, and I'm not sure we would approve that. I mean, that the Witness Stones Committee would approve something that was completely out of keeping with the tone and the taste of the historic district. So I don't think that will happen, but I do think it's that the Historic District Commission can review the final placement and the final details, just to be sure, just to satisfy yourselves.
I apologize. I mean, on signs, we have been pretty. Signs is something that, because for obvious reasons, that we have always reviewed the final design of the sign before even preliminary approval. And I'm not sure why we can't do the same for the library. I mean, I'm putting forth that. Yes, Russ?
I would support that. I think the issue is precedent. While we probably feel that the final sign would be perfectly fine in this case, I would be just concerned about setting a precedent of approving something that is not final and reviewed in future cases. So that would be my comment.
I agree.
I would agree with Russ.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what we could do is to continue the discussion on the sign part of this to the March meeting.
That's fine. That's excellent.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you for all your work, Carolyn. I didn't mean to make it more complex.
Not at all. I think the point is an important one.
Okay, are there any more comments on this public hearing, on any aspect of it? Okay, we can close the public hearing then and move on to our next agenda item, which is the Historic District GIS overlay. And I sent out information for that to everybody. Did everyone get that and have a chance to look at it?
Yes.
When you say everybody, do you mean everybody on the commission?
Everyone on the commission, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm pulling it up, Martha.
And what this is a, it would be an overlay that would delineate the boundaries of the historic district. The 300-foot boundary. The historic district boundaries are 300 feet from the center of Lime Street. So what we want to do is have an overlay on the GIS system so that anybody can look at the map and actually see the boundaries of the historic district on the properties there. Because the Historic District Commission only has jurisdiction over things that are within that 300-foot boundary or in view from the
Or in view?
in view. We do take into account whether you can see something from the road. If it's beyond the 300-foot mark, there's nothing we can do about it. Like the electronic sign at the high school, which that's some.
It's and Martha,
It's the 300
to
feet,
clarify,
not the view, sort of.
this is Russ. To clarify, it's actually defined in the town code, and there's two parts. One is the 300 foot, but then there's also language that speaks to the property line that is the nearest property that is adjacent to the street. So, for example, you'll see on the map there are occasions where there are two properties that are within that 300 foot. The property that is adjacent to Lime Street, the boundary line between that and the second property becomes the historic district demarcation.
It's interesting.
Are there any comments on this?
Well, let me say, I think it would be helpful, Russ, if you went through this and identified where there are questions, or either the ones that you've identified or that you know of, because it would seem to me that there's a number of things that, now that you've raised this issue, that it would be worthy of our discussion, so that we're, there's some historical precedents about how we've applied it, but I don't think anyone has ever taken the kind of analytical view that you are, and we ought to benefit from your analytics.
Okay,
that's at least my recommendation.
Sure. We have worked, Martha. Let me just speak to this. Martha and I have worked to define the boundary per the code, which has resulted in the map that you see there. So, for example, there was some question about property, Martha, you remember, at the Florence Griswold Museum.
Yes, yeah.
That was within the 300 foot, that was not actually showing up on the first map that we received from MapGeo. We've added that. There was also, and let me back up for 1 second for the committee. There's actually a GIS map that's on the National Historic Register that, at least to create the initial overlay, we used as a basis. Then there was some indications beyond the 300 foot line. So what I'm suggesting, John, is that we've kind of gone through this, and our best interpretation is what we see here in the two maps, and the 300 foot boundary being highlighted to show that that distance, and then at the same time the brown area being the interpretation based on the town code. So I don't know, Martha, do we have any more, from our standpoint, any more questions or points that need to be raised to the committee about the map?
The committee is which committee?
The Historic District Committee.
Oh, the
Yeah.
commission. Okay. Sorry.
Commission. I'm sorry. Yeah, commission.
Yeah, I have just a comment, pretty certain that people that are outside of the HDC do not want to be captured on this. Because people feel very sometimes pleased that they're not under the jurisdiction of the HDC. For example, just neighbors of mine, one property back. I don't think that those kinds of situations want to be included on this GIS. Hopefully, it won't, cause a problem for those property owners. As long as it's clear in the statutes what is included in the HDC and what isn't.
Right.
Lisa.
I thought the overlay was pretty clear in showing the property lines and these little indentations, so
yeah,
it shouldn't be a problem.
I would feel, now this is, I'm giving just a personal opinion, I would feel more comfortable now that you've begun to explain this, that we all go back and review the documents, carefully, and that we have a major part of our next meeting is a discussion. And the reason I'm saying this is, I think Deanie's point is a good one, but whether giving people assuming that people can opt out without allowing everyone to opt out, it may not be a good policy. And the second is we do have the problem on small plots, and but we then talk about the 300 feet. Now maybe I should have been raising this 2 or 3 months ago, and so I apologize. But I just feel I feel like that I would be more I guess I'm saying this. This may be a way of doing it, that at our next meeting, we review the recommendation and the exceptions that you're recommending for properties that are within the 300 feet, but we don't think it's appropriate for them to be within the historic district, and be very explicit about that.
That sounds good, John. I think you raise a point. We could go wherever you see an indication of a property line that is short of the 300 feet, and you'll see that by if you look at the red line and then the brown highlighted area. There's some properties that are within that red line that are not. We could go property by property there, and in the discussion with the Historic District Commission, and just confirm that is correct at the next meeting, and then maybe give everybody a little bit more time.
Something this important, that being that thorough, I know it's a little bit of a pain, but being that thorough, I personally would feel more comfortable, particularly in light of what we're finding, like the research that John Noyes did, which is giving us some new insights in terms of what's applicable and what's not. And the careful work that Carolyn's done on the witness stone, I think we're moving to a way the commission works, that we are being much more careful about what's applicable and what's not, and this is a very important point. I mean, I really
One
think it's
additional-
phenomenal the work that Martha, you and that Russ have done. So I'm not talking in terms of the work. I'm just talking about anything that we're going to, the final recommendation needs to be thorough.
Yeah.
John, one additional step is perhaps the town attorney interpreting the code. In other words, this is Martha and I interpreting the language of the code with respect to the boundary. Perhaps one additional step for the thoroughness that you're describing is to have the town attorney review the map and the code language
Right.
for alignment. I might suggest that.
I think that's terrific.
Does our current handbook include some of these nuances about historic district only applies to the first lot, even if it's less than 300 feet?
I don't think so, no.
No.
Because there are
It just says
several.
300 feet.
I know we just not long ago did a handbook, but we're accumulating some nuances that are important to communicate. I think.
Yeah.
And whether that means communicating and doing another run of the handbook or not, but they do need clearly to be communicated in some readily accessible format.
John, we can always do like we've done a couple times, I believe. We can print up an addendum that doesn't require us to redo the handbook. I mean, we obviously need to send it to residents so that they know what's going on, but that they can be included in the handbook. And that's been a technique we've used in the past.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask this. Is there anyone who has a different point of view than what I expressed or was expressed by Russ and Martha?
My only question is not a different point of view, but John, at one or two times you referred to exceptions. By exceptions, do you mean anything other than the short lots, if you will?
Yeah, I would say anything where someone's within the 300 feet, but we don't think that they should be part of the historic district.
But
that's why I was using the word exception.
But we don't think they should be because of the code language. You're not talking about any other exceptions, are you?
No. I mean, that's what I think is this map is doing is to establish a definitive boundary for the
yes,
which is a very major event because obviously, and there will be people that will argue they should be out versus in.
Well, maybe. I mean, it depends.
Yeah.
It depends on if the boundary between the first and second lot is clear, as it should be. I don't think there's much room for argument. But you're right that the map, we need to be certain that the map is accurate and in compliance with the code.
Now, I have one other request, Russ. For some reason, the file that was sent to me, my 10-year-old computer can't download it. Could you please just send the final map that we are referring to each of us in the simplest file possible? I guess it would be a PDF.
I can mail you a hard copy, John.
A hard copy, yeah.
Yeah, I can mail you a hard copy. I don't have the.
Why don't you mail me a hard copy and then send me a new electronic copy? I may be able to handle it.
Okay.
But I apologize for this, but this is what happens when you have a young 79-year-old trying to deal with modern technology. Now, let me. Any other questions on the great work that Martha and Russ have done?
Congratulations.
Oh, Russ did all the work, actually.
Great job, Russ. Really great job.
Really fabulous job.
Yes,
And by the way, we also ought to give a special shout out for Carolyn on the work she's been doing on the witness stones.
absolutely.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
No longer a sleepy organization.
Hi, it's MJ. It sounds like you're wrapping up and I have to run. Martha, I have 2 copies of the handbook, a green version and a blue version, and there are no more at Town Hall. Can you supply them with some more? They're very helpful to people in town
Sure.
who are looking at properties. And if you have any important addendums, I don't think they care about the map overlay. They have an idea of where the district is.
Yeah.
Any important addendums, you could stick those in as well.
Sure.
And do you have an electronic copy of it? Because some people will like it in an email version. I've taken one apart, which is why I don't have one anymore. So I could scan it.
We actually don't have a really good electronic copy of the new one. I can try to get one. But the way they did the printing was kind of here and there, and the file didn't lend itself to a good electronic copy. But I can definitely make sure that we have them available at Town Hall.
That would be great because people love them and prospective buyers are very interested in seeing what your general rules are.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I do give them to people. I try to do it electronically, but when I can't, it would help. Is the latest version the blue one though?
Yes.
Blue booklet?
The blue one is the most recent. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
The green one is not really, there weren't any massive changes. Really, we just updated the photographs and we
noticed.
We did a few things, but
added a map,
information.
a nice map at the back.
Yeah.
I love the map. I have reproduced the map for people because they like that. And that's usually where they start before the rules.
What is the cost, Martha, of if we added another nonprofit on the map?
I have no idea. Are you talking about the Roger Tory Peterson estuary?
I just happen to have that idea. I wonder why. Would you find out? Because I'm sure we have a donor or two that would be glad to fund that.
You mean reprint the whole thing?
No, just print a copy. No. I'm not saying reprint the whole thing. Just have a copy of the map separate with this edition that then can be distributed as you might see fit.
Mm-hmm. I can find out.
I mean, if it's less than $500, I know of at least one donor that would probably pitch in.
Mm-hmm. I'll find out.
I'm going to go and thank you for letting me sit in. But Martha, did you say you dropped some booklets off at Town Hall?
Yes, I will.
Would there be enough for me to take at least 3 of them?
Sure. Yep.
All right. I appreciate it, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks, Martha, for that little bit of homework.
Sure. Okay, so we're going to continue the discussion on the GIS overlay at the March meeting. And we can go on to any other new or old business, which would be the banner frame and the Lafayette Trail marker update.
Where are we on the banner frame?
The banner frame is what?
Church.
That would be the church, yeah, the banner frame at the church.
I can give a brief update on my follow-up questions, I think.
Okay,
I'll try to keep it brief. You may remember from last time that there was a distinction between what I call structure signs that are planted in the ground and advertising signs. And one question came up about whether we had jurisdiction over over the location of structure signs that were not advertising signs, because the statutory section that the attorney quoted gave us authority only over their size and frame and things like that. The short answer is yes, we do have jurisdiction over the location of structure signs. There's yet another statutory section. I'm not going to offer editorial comments, but this is the attorney's reading. That statutory section directs the HDCs to consider the quote unquote arrangement of signs and their relationship to other buildings and structures. And the attorney reads that language as providing authority over location. I should add here that I have confirmed with the attorney that it is all right to distribute the full text of his two opinions, opinion memos. So I will send those out to Martha to be distributed.
In the meantime, Martha, at one of our prior meetings, I don't remember whether it was November or we met with someone from the church, and they were going to come up with some other designs, right?
yes, yeah.
And
But I think we were waiting to clarify exactly what our authority is over those signs. And I think we are, I mean, this is going to be the end of my comments. I do think we have authority, with one important caveat that I want to note in a minute. But my suggestion was going to be that the way to proceed was exactly what Dean suggested. They have offered to be accommodating. And I think now that we've confirmed that we do have authority over location, and that we probably would, even if it's not an advertising sign. The advertising signs, we clearly have authority over location, but we've also clarified that it probably is an advertising sign, because the definition of advertising sign is so broad as to include promulgation of ideas. So I think Deanie's spot on that we should. I'm preempting, I think, what she was going to say, but we have a basis for continuing the conversation and hopefully coming to a resolution of the matter.
So do we
amicably.
Do we notify the church of that, or I don't remember how they thought it was left?
We can send them a letter saying that, we have consulted attorney, we've gotten a legal opinion, and that we've settled the question of whether we have jurisdiction over the frame and the location and the design. So we could do that.
Well, and my recollection was that they were going to come back with, they had offered to come back with a design and just say, we understood from when you were here in November that you were planning to do this, and we look forward to receiving your ideas.
Yeah.
What I would suggest, because I think Bob McCracken was very accommodating and is not a particularly legalistic person. that I would suggest you call Bob to tell him, you know, we're waiting and that we've clarified our authority, and then send him a confirming letter.
Okay.
And I only do that because I think that will make a greater impact on what Bob does.
So I can follow up on my other clarification questions. One had to do with the distinction of between advertising signs and structure signs. It really becomes of minimal importance now that we've confirmed that we have jurisdiction over location of both. But a key point with structure signs is that they must be affixed to the ground. So the attorney sent a fairly extensive discussion of what that means. It kind of comes up with, let's say, a sign that is placed on a boulder or a rock that was there anyway. And nobody's affixing the boulder to the ground. It was just there. So that's when there may be a question. But certainly with respect to the witness stones, those I think from his discussion would be considered as affixed to the ground. He thinks there's a good case to be made in any event that historic signs convey enough information so that they would be considered advertising signs. Is this making sense to you? Do you remember the discussion of the advertising signs,
Yes.
structure signs? So that historical signs convey enough ideas about the importance of history or some event that they would be considered advertising signs anyway. And for that reason, if there were some discussion in the future about whether a sign attached to a rock really is a structure sign, we don't have to worry because it probably would be considered an advertising sign. With respect to the church, where it may come up is with respect to banners.
Yeah.
I think there's some suggestions that we may be able to regulate banners, but he's not very definite about it. In other words, that may be an example of an advertising sign that's not a structure sign because the banner itself is not really planted in the ground in any way. But, you know, I'm not sure what the church has offered to deal with. I don't think, my recollection is that we did not discuss with the church representatives, did not discuss the particular issues of size of banners, for example, or color of banners. Another follow-up question: since we have authority over temporary signs, must because the statute's phrased in mandatory terms, must the HDC really approve even temporary political signs? And here's where statutory language meets reality. I want to just briefly quote his response. Unless political signs, quote, become an onerous problem in terms of the historic character of the district, the HDC perhaps should be reluctant to take them on and should rely on the zoning enforcement officers to see that signs that do not meet the limits on size, location, and duration in the zoning regulations are promptly removed. I think this echoes John's point from a few meetings ago that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I had
Well,
presented.
sooner or later, Mr. Trump is going to come along and try to break that rule, but let's hope it's later rather than sooner.
You know,
I've said it before, but when I first moved into the district, I was told by Devin Carney, actually, who's one of our local politicians, I'm sure you know, that there's a gentleman's agreement within the district not to display political signs.
Right.
That's what I was told. Yep.
Yep. And so, you know, that's been pretty well observed, I would say, in the time 10, 12 years I've been here. So, with the exception, you know, and that comes to John's point, you know, what's political? Does it have to have a politician's name for a campaign to be political? Or, you know, we all know anyway. So I think.
well, I can think of at least one example in the past election where there was a political sign advocating one candidate was posted in the historic district. So I'm not sure whether all new owners are aware of that gentleman's agreement.
Maybe not.
They weren't new owners.
Oh, I'm thinking of one that was a relatively new owner.
Oh, okay.
Am I remembering correctly, Russ? Didn't your neighbor have a sign? Russ may not be here. Okay.
I did. Oh, I'm sorry, John. I was not aware of that. But perhaps, yeah.
Okay. I could be I could be recalling incorrectly.
Right.
Anyway, it's pretty good. I mean, the neighborhood is not plastered with signs. I had found some additional information about a bill poster, and I said, "Do you want to take any?" The attorney's previous advice was, "I don't know what a bill poster is," based on my research into the legislative history, et cetera. I said, "Do you want to take any of this new information into account?" And he basically said no. He did not want to amend his first opinion. He didn't say, but I expect that he's just being an attorney. In other words, when you're interpreting a statute, there are certain sources you use and stuff you find on the internet that maybe was posted after a statute was enacted would not be legally recognizable. His comment was, "I expect the HDC will know what a bill poster is when it sees one." So, I mean, if we ever did get a large sign that served as a backboard for a number of different signs, we probably would say, yeah, that's something we should look at. But he hasn't found in his standard legal research, is the way I read his opinion. He hasn't found in his standard legal research any definition of what a bill poster was at the time the statute was enacted, and has not found any subsequent case law.
John, one of the things that we, at some point we've talked about is someone who nails a sign into a tree.
That is precluded under the zoning regulations for any signs anywhere.
Okay. So there's someplace else that's picked up. Fine.
Right, but I think that could be for us. I mean, if the zoning authorities granted an exception, I'm just hypothesizing. I think we would have authority over such a sign, probably under the rubric of advertising signs.
Well, now let me ask that: would we have more leverage if we also got the tree commission involved?
I don't know.
No, I don't think so.
All right.
One of the, my last follow-up question was, and I at the time was thinking of temporary signs where technically we do have jurisdiction. Is there any mechanism by which the HDC may approve in advance certain temporary signs and effectively say, even though technically a C of A is required for a temporary sign, we're approving signs that meet the following criteria, as long as they're not up for 30 days. And his answer is there is no such authority. These C of A's must be conducted on a case-by-case basis.
So every year when the Catholic Church does a steak dinner, they're supposed to come and ask, or every time Phoebe Griffin Noyes bookseller opens, they have to come for a C of A?
It seems ridiculous. My comment at the outset was, I think when we were talking about, some point earlier in the meeting, I said, I think A, people won't recognize the need for a sign. B, by the time if they did, by the time they put in an application, the sign would be down. So it's sort of ridiculous. But his.
Well, let me ask a different case. Whenever, like, for example, when our new owner of the building just north of the town hall, when he had drilling the well diggers had a big sign up, and now he's changed his septic system. The builder has had a sign up. And I don't know if this bothers anyone or not. It does not bother me, but if we're talking about signs, are these ones that in fact are picked up in our regulation?
Sure.
They are.
If they're affixed to the ground.
Okay, yeah, they put them, in the ground with metal bars so that they will stand there proudly talking about the builder.
And probably they're in our jurisdiction because they're advertising signs, in that if they have the name of the builder, they could be construed as advertising, getting the word out about a service that's offered.
Martha, so we're not complicated on this. This might be something the next time we go through a thorough review of our booklet that we would want to make some mention of.
Yes, and that was one of the attorney's recommendations. He says you may want to consider some guidance as to what would be acceptable or desirable. Add that to the handbook. That he was referring specifically to temporary signs, but
I would advocate doing that, but I would also like to say, and it's something that I've noticed, for years, is that our regulations are not applied uniformly. That what is acceptable on some places here, is not acceptable in others. I think if we're going to make a clear policy, then we also have to commit to ourselves to clearly enforce them.
Are you talking when we're not consistent, Deanie? Are you talking about?
I'm talking about when we're not consistent, for example, with the church. Here we all are observing the gentleman's agreement that we don't post political signs, trying to discourage perhaps our workmen from putting out signs because we are aware of these things. And yet the church has no such, consideration.
Well, the church, and this is the last point that the attorney made, the church is a very sensitive subject because
I know
what you call a political sign is a religious social justice sign. And his last note was, and I want to read he says, I remind to really explore this would take another pretty lengthy memo. I said, but I would remind you that with respect to the church, the HDC is subject to the federal Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act, and its equivalent in the states. In general, federal and state statutes, quote, require that a mission not substantially burden the entity's religious exercise except in furtherance of a compelling governmental interest that is the least restrictive means of achieving that interest. Now, I don't know the statute. I haven't studied it. It's way out of my ballpark. The question, but this was going to lead up to my suggestion that Deanie's already made, that the way to approach things with the church might be to just pick up on their offer to do things. Reading just this quote, which sticks out to me, is that we may not substantially burden their religious exercise. In other words, goodness sakes, if they can have a sign that expresses whatever position they want, then I don't see how they're substantially burdened.
They're not. But nor should anyone else be.
Well, correct.
Yeah.
It doesn't, I'm just coming into this late, but doesn't that indicate that there's a special provision for places of worship which doesn't apply to individual homes, so that it's not applied, as you said, consistently but uniformly, that there's some difference here? That's what I'm hearing from this discussion.
Well, yeah, I can't answer the question unless we got more information about the details of these acts, but the language suggests that there may be, but it's not, as just reading this phrase, it's not a blanket yes, no authority. It's not an act that says town commissions may have no authority over anything posted on church property.
Yeah.
We just may not substantially burden the religious institutions' exercise of their expression of their opinions.
Okay, well, I'm afraid I'm already a half an hour late for another meeting, so I'm going to sign off.
Anyway, I will circulate these letters, or send them to Martha to circulate.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Okay.
I'd like to make one point that I always, when I'm looking at these kind of issues, for the last 30 years, the calculations that I've done, that over $100 billion has been invested in the Old Lyme Historic District, and that a substantial part of that is the result of people buying houses and upgrading the houses, or institutions buying things like the Bee and Thistle and stuff like that and upgrading that, so that the benefits of the historic district from a point of view of investment in the community have been substantial. And not that I like to talk about this very much, but this is one of the guiding points I keep in my own, for myself, is I'm thinking about these kind of, of maintaining the attractiveness of the historic district. Because I probably have personally been involved in $10 or $15 million of investment, not with my own money, but involved in that in terms of upgrading the historic district. And so it is a very important thing that we're involved in. And it takes real money to keep a historic district historic. So there is a real responsibility that we have.
Here, here.
Martha, is there anything else?
Just the Lafayette Trail marker update. We still need to get approval from the Board of Selectmen to install that. And
Is that going to require some push with Tim or not?
yeah, I'm in touch with Tim on that, so I have a sample letter to send him. There's something that he has to do as the first selectman. He has to write a letter and everything. So I said I would write a rough draft of it and then he will adjust it. So we're moving forward with that.
Thank you very much.
And that's really all we have, unless someone else has something they want to add.
With respect to signs or witness stones that are on private property, why does the Board of Selectmen have to approve that, as long as the signs conform with zoning regs and HDC requirements?
It's only if it's within the town right of way. And we have to figure that out on a case-by-case basis per property because the right of way is not consistent.
So if, for example, the witness stones are not in the town right of way, beyond whatever that setback is, then there would be no need to go to the selectmen.
Correct.
Ralph? Hi, I am still on my Zoom meeting. I should be off in 5 or 10 minutes and I'll call you. Thank you. Hello?
Yes. Yep. So any stone that would be installed outside of the town right of way does not need approval. It's only stones that would be installed within the town right of way.
Okay.
But it's kind of tricky.
Now, when you say within the town right of way, for example, in our part of Lime Street, the controlling right of way may be the state setback.
Right.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Which is much greater because this used to be Route 1.
Right. Yeah, in some cases the right of way is 30 feet back from the edge of the road. And in some cases it's only 10 feet. So we take that on a case-by-case basis.
Okay.
And Martha, just to be clear, north of I-95, the right-of-way will have to be reviewed by the state, correct?
Yes, that's right. Yep. And I'm working with Dan Beret on that, and with Public Works to figure out exactly where those rights of way are. So,
Martha, when they declared the mile of road as a scenic road, you know, for the, does that imply the state has multiple organizations that have to be dealt with in the review process?
I don't think scenic road designation goes beyond the state DOT.
Okay.
Because that designation actually came from them.
Yeah.
We had to apply
but it's a different part of the It's a different part of the DOT. That's all I was referring to. Is it?
Oh, okay.
To make sure that they, whoever is the key contact within DOT, is aware of that, so that they'll make they'll loop in the bureaucracy.
Yep, that's a really good point.
The Newington Mafia. Is
Folks,
there anything else? Are we ready to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
I
I'll
second.
second that.
Okay.
Thanks, Martha, for a phenomenal job.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Martha. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Mark.